So next time we might get a bell.
Yes.
Hear that, Phil Bell? Okay, so we're going to keep moving, and we'll just finish up. Now there's a whole bunch of notes there that I've written around the boundary stuff, but boundaries and work. I'm often to come and asked to work with people around work issues. And again, the boundaries book is really good because it does split it up into family and work and various situations you may find yourself in where boundaries can actually be compromised or pushed back. So again, I like it because of that. You don't have to just read it in one chunk. You can take the bits and pieces you need. So again, a good book for that. Just moving on quickly, saying no to the bad. And again, let me be very clear that you should never put yourself in a situation that compromises who you are as a person. And again, we need to be aware of that. I'm very aware that when I work in mental health and I love working in mental health, but I'm not going to have someone compromise who I am or put me in a threatening situation that I don't feel good about. So even for me, it gets down to, just even my basic health. So last November, I ruptured my Achilles. I was skipping down the road with my daughter. Having fun, just having a ball. But I haven't been back into our secured area till just last week because I didn't feel safe enough to be able to get out of a situation if something happened. Does that make sense for you? Yeah. So I was monitoring what was going on physically for me to make sure that if something happened, I could actually get myself out the door. I didn't feel I could do that until about a couple of weeks ago, I think I started realising. But again, if people start compromising who we are as well, you're not very good at what you do, or if you were better than this, you do this for me, all that kind of stuff, you need to back away from that bus. You need to take time and say, look, I'm hearing this as threat, and I need to walk away for a period of time. And people will do that to us. They'll kind of push on those boundaries to compromise who we are. If you let that happen, who do you become? A blob. You're right, a blob. And again, you stop being who you are. So again, keep that in mind as you kind of do the boundary stuff, whether it's at work or church or all that kind of stuff. It's never good for you to be compromised in who you are. And sometimes people can say things that can make us feel compromised, can't they? Or even make implied threats. So again, we need to be aware of that. I've also said don't fall into the traps. And again, these are just some of the things I find people try to kind of push on those boundary stuff to kind of make me fall a bit. And so these are some of the things I found people are very good at doing. And so again, you need to be aware that people often use language as a way of trying to kind of push on our boundaries to see whether we'll tip. And so we need to be aware of some of that language. So again, I think last time I talked about, I went away on holidays for a period of time. We had another chaplain come in. And as soon as I got back, I saw a person I knew, and they came up to me and said, gee, Mark, that person you had come in, they were really fantastic, weren't they? And they did all this stuff for me, and it was really great. And if only you could do that. Started compromising who I am, trying to push me to a place that was not healthy. Does that make sense with people? So again, when we hear that stuff, we need to be aware of it. Otherwise, we can find ourselves getting run over, or we find ourselves being a blob and getting pretty annoyed and frustrated by the end of it and not doing so well. Again, so keep that in mind as you do your pastoral care.
Can I just ask for clarification there? That's different, isn't it, from somebody giving you a specific critique, which is something you can actually act on?
Yeah, and people come up to me and they say, Mark, I've got something to tell you. What do you think the first question is that I ask them? Do you want to know? No, the first question, if someone comes up to me and says, Mark, I really want to tell you this.
You get out your diary.
That's a little bad.
No, the first question I'll ask them is, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you care about me? Because there are some people that want to come and tell you stuff, and it's only to kind of push your buttons or make you do things or make you feel bad or small.
So if I came up to you and said, I want to tell you something,
Yeah.
you would say to me,
I want to tell you something about you, me, and how you operate, how I operate,
oh,
how I
yeah,
act.
right,
You can come and tell me things, but if you're coming to tell me about who I am
yeah,
and
then
what
I
I
don't
am,
say that. Yeah,
then that's the first question I
yes,
ask, is do you love me? Or do you care about me? Because again, it's this idea of being compromised or pushed to do something. Yeah? So there's some more reading there to do, and again, we need to be aware that again, we've been given lots of gifts and skills, and we need boundaries to be able to use them well and to provide good pastoral care for them. So have a read, have a think about it. Again, get really interested, pick up the book. The book has a lot more in it than what I can give you in an hour or so. Yeah?
I'm not sure if you're planning on continuing on to this, but you've got one here that says, "You are so good, how do we manage without you?" I find it very interesting that you put it on there. And what do you think would be an appropriate response to someone saying that?
Oh no, I have people often say to me, you know, Mark, you've been doing this mental health stuff for so long, and how could we get along without you? People often say that. And what I say is, oh, thanks for that. And then I kind of wander off. No, really, because again, I can fall over tomorrow and die, and someone else will come and replace me. You know, I'm not. Yeah.
So you simply take the compliment, thank them, and then leave it at that.
Yeah,
and don't
leave it at that. Yeah.
try to emphasize.
I don't want to
it
get
more.
caught in that.
Yeah.
Because then I'm caught doing things I may not want to do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
I've had the opposite of that too, when they say, "Yeah, what's wrong with you?" And I say, "How long have you got?" Shuts them down. You come there.
Now, I'm not sure we're going to have enough notes. I think I made 30 for people. Pass around and see how you go.
we'll just have one.
Whatever the next bit is.
Coming around. Alright, so I just want to finish up by talking about buttons, and I'm not sure we did this last time, but all of us have buttons, and we need to be aware of our buttons. Because if you're not aware of your buttons, guess what? Someone will come along and punch you, and then you'll react or respond in ways that probably aren't appropriate or helpful for either you or the person that you're providing pastoral care for. And all of us have been kind of hurt or stuck in various ways, and we often carry those buttons. So let me use an example. For many years, I had the button of, if I got around an older man, my button would go off. And it was simply because I lived in an abusive relationship and my dad was the abuser. And I learned that I had a button and it could keep me safe, but what it did was trigger around certain types of people. Have you noticed that in yourselves? Yeah? So that's a button. I've had to work on that button over the years, because what it's meant for me now that is I meet older men now and I see them as a resource and a gift. But previously I wouldn't. In fact, someone may come around that reminded me of my dad and I just wanted to punch him. That's a button. But we can also have buttons in other areas as well. And what I'm saying is we need to be aware of them so that we can actually manage them, get some healing over them, deal with them when they kind of come up. But again, it's up to us to manage those or to deal with them. Because no one else is going to do it, by the way. No one else is going to come along and say, let me fix your button. That's just not going to work, is it? So again, we need to be aware of those buttons. And for people who've been traumatised or... Oh, Sarah, okay. For people who've been traumatised or hurt, or who, last time we talked about being around difficult people are expert at punching buttons.
Can I just ask, when you say that no one is going to be able to fix your button,
Yeah.
what about psychiatrists and psychologists?
If we let them fix them, or help them in fixing them, yes.
Right,
Yeah. But it's up to us to take the responsibility for the button,
right.
and it's up to us to go and ask for help if we need it. Yeah. Where was I? But again, for people who are really difficult, they are really good at punching buttons. They found it works. They found it works, and it works well to be able to punch the button, because what it means is they get what they need, or whatever it is fixed up, but don't have to give back into the relationship. Does that make sense for people? You know, and so the problem's sorted, okay, I've got what I want, see you later.
Is that like just making it so that the other person gets what they want, as if to say that they feel good about themselves after loving something or other?
Yeah, or getting something from us. Yeah, so they feel good, problems dealt with, but they don't have to manage
So
the
they're just trying
relationship.
to care about themselves and, you know.
Yeah. Or they don't have the capacity to do it.
Right.
Often people don't have the capacity. For a lot of people I've worked with around the mental health stuff, I often hear stories of trauma and people in quite deep pain. And it's not something we recognise well within our culture. But there are still stats around that say, you know, I think it's 1 in 3 women will be sexually abused in their lives, 1 in 6 men. So it doesn't count all the other forms of physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, you know, abuse that can go on for people as well. So, you know, the rates of trauma in our community are quite high still. So people will get traumatised, or they'll get hurt, or they're trying to manage an ongoing mental health problem that makes it hard for them to be able to interact in the world, but still need to be loved and cared for. And so they found that, okay, I can do this so that I get what I want, but I don't have to engage with that person. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so again, in our pastoral care, we need to be aware that there are people around who will kind of punch our buttons, and sometimes we can find ourselves, you know, having a button punched, and then afterwards you walk away feeling really frustrated and annoyed, and like if you had a baseball bat, you could use it at that particular time on that particular person. Is that just me, or is... So again, we need to be aware of that kind of button pushing. And again, people will do that to us. Again, I've given you some notes on it, so have a read them. Actually, this is a set of notes I wrote about some of the issues that people who are difficult people have, but I haven't brought the full article. If you want a copy of the full article, I'm happy to get it for you. So some of the conflict problems, some of the buttons we can have are issues around conflict and how you manage conflict. And again, people will pick up pretty quickly what you're like at managing conflict. And they'll read it in you and see it in you, and they'll punch that button to get what they want. So for me, I am a fighter. If you come at me, you better come with all guns blazing. So if you get me into a conflict situation, normally that I can get into that. Anyone else like that?
Or just paint me into a corner.
Yeah, paint you into a corner. So for me, I need to be aware that one of my buttons is if you come at me and you keep coming at me, eventually I will flare. And I may say things that And again, I can do it really well. I can slice and dice and still have a smile on my face while I'm doing it. Oh no, I'm really good at it. The trouble is that then afterwards, I feel really bad and guilty. And then if I'm not aware of it, I need to go to that person and fix it. Now if that person has done that on purpose, kept coming at me knowing that I've got this button, who eventually has the control? They do. So you may have issues around conflict that you may need to be aware of and how you manage it. And I know for some people that if you keep pushing on them and pushing, they eventually just get passive and they'll fold. Anyone else do that? And for other people it's like they just, they'll want to get rid of them, so they'll give them what they want and then they run away. But we all have these buttons around conflict. If you're really interested in reading about conflict and conflict management, a guy called Augsburger is really good. And he's written a lot on conflict and a lot on conflict management. He does a lot of work around the world about resolving conflicts in cultures as well, in different cultures. But he's written some very good stuff around dealing with conflict and conflict management. And I like his style.
Mark, how would you spell that, Nancy?
Sorry, let me see if I can spell it. So it's Augsburger. It's an American guy. That's not his fault. But, again, he does write some really good stuff. And I like his style because he's actually saying there are kind of 5 kind of styles of conflict management, and you use them like a kind of a rotation. So you may get into conflict with someone and you'll use a particular style at that time depending on what's going on. And then you may change it again depending, but it's always with this idea of resolving what's going on. So it's quite an adaptable style. Some of the other stuff I've seen is, it's very, one track. The trouble is I find people aren't one track. So, I need to have an adaptable style. So again, he writes well. But again, you need to be aware of your conflict management style, and you need to be aware of what happens when you get into conflict. And some of you will just naturally be great at it. You'll feel quite confident in who you are, and you'll have a lot of good self-confidence. And for you, that getting into conflict is not a problem. In fact, you'll see conflict as being quite normal and natural. For others, conflict is not normal and natural and to be avoided at all costs. In some ways, for some of us, we'll be somewhere in between that. And it's worth being aware of it so that we can be aware of those buttons and do something about them. And even when they get pressed, you can feel them being pressed, you can actually then say, I need some space or time out or whatever it is, and be able to move around with it. Does that make sense for you? But again, it's going to happen. It's normal to get conflict, by the way. It's very normal, it's very natural, because we all come from diverse backgrounds, diverse situations, different life skills, different life experience, different perceptions. So for me, I have this view that conflict is quite normal and natural. And it can be used as a tool to help us to grow and develop and think about things differently. The reason I like Augsburger's work is because he actually says when 2 people get into conflict, it's not who's right or who's wrong, but it's about developing a new picture so that life can be lived differently. And that's why I like his model. But it does help give you some skills and some tools to be able to work on it. And again, need to think about it. But again, I think conflict is quite normal. Some of the other things that can be buttons for us are unmet needs. And again, we all have unmet needs that we need to be aware of so that we're not manipulated. The need to be loved, the need to be valued, the need for sex, the need to feel in control, the need to be liked, the need to feel important. All of these needs, if unrecognised or dealt with, can be used to manipulate or to control. So we all have unmet needs in some way, shape or form. And again, we need to be aware of what those unmet needs are and whether they're realistic or not. I mean, again, we've had this great problem within the life of the church of the abuse stuff. I went to a conference once where I had to put up my hand and say I'm a minister. And it was a conference on abuse. And they were giving stats out like, I think they were saying that for psychiatrists, there's 10% of psychiatrists will abuse patients. But then they said 40% of clergy will abuse them. And I thought, okay. But there's these unmet needs that are not being met, that are being met in unhealthy ways. Does that make sense? So we all have these needs within us, and we need to recognise them. This is part of who we are, part of life, and part of what goes on. It doesn't mean they're necessarily wrong, but it does mean we need to be able to have the space to be able to think about them and work them out, take time to pray, take time to think, but take time to work on them, because they're going to be there. And so again, but people can read those. I don't know how or why, but I know a lot of the people I work with can actually read those. They can read them. You can too, by the way, in some way, shape or form, but for a lot of people I work with, they are really good at reading that, and they're really good at punching into that. So, even people when they come up to me and they say, Mark, you're the best thing since sliced bread. I recognise that there's a need for me to be liked at all costs. Is it realistic? Oh, no way. Is it healthy? No way. So I need to be aware of that. Does that make sense for people? So again, we need to think our way through that if we're going to provide pastoral care to people who are often in distress or feeling quite traumatised, all that kind of stuff, because it will happen. And the last thing you want to do is get, if I get a chance to talk about transference and counter-transference stuff, we need to be aware of that. But do people know about transference and counter-transference? Okay.
I've heard the terms.
Heard the terms? Yep. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to be true to time.
That's about me recognising somebody else has something going on in them, that they put it on me.
That's right.
And then you responding to it.
I've got something that's going on in me, and I put it on them. That's what they're talking about, because it's in me.
So there's transference, which is coming from the person to us. And it can happen in two ways. One is that they've had some awful stuff happen to them, and so what they do is they come along and they talk to us like we're actually the person. Does that make sense? Have you had that happen to you? You will have, by the way. You will have had someone come up to you and say, gee, this is what and it's like they're actually talking, and you become that person that is either hurt or traumatised or said something they didn't agree with. That's transference. It's never helpful. Never helpful in any situation. Never helpful in pastoral care.
Go ahead. Well, what's the difference between having a natural empathy for someone and listening without, how do you not step over the line and get into
How do you not?
that?
I won't let people talk at me like I'm the person, this person, and they'll use language that indicates that I've become that person.
What sort of thing?
They may start getting really angry and looking at me like, it was all you did. Have you had that happen, or is it just me?
No.
And that's the transference stuff. And it's never healthy, because what it does is stop you from being you. And how can you be helpful to someone if you stop being you? You can't. So again, you need to be able to see that coming. And with some people I've actually had, and I say to them, because I want to break it, I want to shift it. So I do a couple of things. One is I shift chairs or places. Really subtle, but I'll shift. So I'll shift my position, shift chairs, whatever it is I need to do, I'll shift. Or I'll actually say to them, gee, it sounds to me like you're really angry with that person, and if you had the chance you'd give them the, whatever. But I'm not actually that person, and we need to stop for a minute and we need to recoup what we think. Does that make sense for me?
Is that a bit like don't shoot the messenger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm here to be helpful for you, but I can't be helpful while this is happening. This is what I think is happening, yeah?
When people have a need simply to express their hurt and the need to vent, what's an appropriate way for them to do that if them venting
They
their
need to
anger
talk in
at
I language, and they need to talk about what happened to them with this person. So I was really hurt, and sometimes I need to educate people about that, because they've never been taught to use the I statements, or they've never been taught to talk about in third person stuff. Because it all just floods them and it happens to them, so they want to dump it. Because if they dump it, it does work, by the way. They can dump it and they feel better for a little bit. But it's only a little bit. It doesn't actually bring healing or wholeness, it just dumps. And they blow off the steam valve and then they're fine. Does it? Yeah? So transference can happen that way. I think transference can also happen where you put on a pedestal. Again, best thing since sliced bread. You're the knight, the rescuer, the mum, whatever the role is, you can find yourself being put into a role that's not helpful for you and puts you on a bit of a pedestal. And you need to be careful of that stuff as well, because again, you stop being who you are. Does that make sense for people? Yeah?
And how do you respond to that?
When people say, oh Mark, you're the best chaplain I've ever seen, I say, actually no, I'm not. But I actually say, I'm here to help, and I want to be able to help you, but I can't do it when this is happening. And I'll give an example of what that is, and I'll talk about it, and I'll put it right in the open. Because again, they're trying to actually get what it is they need, but they think they need to do it in a certain way, and I want to re-educate them that no, that's not going to happen. Does that make sense? But it's being aware of it for yourself that's really important. You're not going to be able to help them unless you realise this is going on. Counter-transference is the other thing where it happens the other way. So counter-transference may happen because these people give you all this crap and they dump it on you and they keep dumping on you. Eventually you get to the point of wanting to be, well, if you didn't see them again, you'd be happy. Perhaps not like I'm the only one. Is that right? But you can start saying or doing things that are not healthy for the relationship. And you start saying, doing things that just are not helpful at all. You need to be aware of when your frustration levels rise, and when you're starting to feel like you can't be helpful, all that kind of stuff, because all this stuff is building up in your head. You need to go and debrief. The other thing that can happen, counter-transference, is when you dump, not when you dump, but all your unmet needs are being met by that person. That's counter-transference as well.
Could you repeat that one? Sorry.
So, when your unmet needs are being met by this person, that's not healthy, because you're not there for them.
So when you're depending on them,
To make you feel good about yourself, or
but then the relationship's toxic, so
the relationship just,
But so they're not healthy for you, but
They're not
you
healthy.
continue to
yeah,
go to them because you.
they make you feel good, or you get something out of it. I mean, and we do get something out of pastoral care, by the way. You know, I get really good, you know, I get really great when I see someone and they say to me, Mark, I don't want to see you again, because they're doing well. You know, or people finally get what's going on and they say, gee, I'm feeling really good about this. You know, we'll get something out of that. That's okay. But it's when we're getting our unmet needs met in that relationship with something.
Your example before was if you're talking with an older man,
Yeah.
that's counter-transference because you're reading into whatever they say, your father or whatever,
Yeah.
then that's counter-transference.
Yes.
It's actually the stuff in you that you're reading into the
Yeah,
situation.
so it's my baggage that's getting in the way. Yeah. Does that make sense for people? So, conflicts, buttons, and past hurts. So I just kind of talked about past hurts as a button. But again, all of us have past hurts in some way, shape or form. And again, for some people they can be very good at punching those buttons of our past hurt and either making us feel really small or making us feel inadequate or making us feel like we don't kind of want to be there in order to get what they want. And so we need to be quite clear about some of the baggage we carry. Otherwise, we're not going to be helpful for the relationship. It's just not going to work. And so we need to be aware of what our own baggage is and what we're carrying. And you all have past hurts that can be triggered by that. They'll be there in some way, shape or form. And you know, that happens to people all over the place. But it's better to recognise it and name it and say, this is an issue for me, and go and talk to someone about it. Because it won't be worked out in this relationship, and neither should it. Shouldn't be worked out in this kind of relationship. So does that make sense for people? So again, and when you're working with quite distressed people, with people who are really unwell, they have a really good gift of being able to punch your buttons. And again, it gets them what they need, but without having to jump into the relationship and do the things that we would consider normal, healthy for relationships. So again, we need to be aware of that. Otherwise, we will just do stuff that's not helpful. And we'll walk out of that feeling like, gee, I didn't do a very good job. Does anyone ever feel that? So again, better to recognise that we have buttons and that it's quite normal, and we need to deal with them and need to make sure we're aware of them. So at least if we're aware of them, you can actually say, well, I can feel that button going on. And then perhaps it's, okay, I'll go and talk to someone, or perhaps I need to debrief with someone, or how do I work this through? But again, it's, we need to be able to do that. And we need to be able to do that because, again, a lot of the people we work with are quite distressed and finding life quite difficult. I mean, people don't come to us because life is going well normally, do they? They come to us because their life is, they're feeling a bit distressed, a bit unsure, not sure about what's going on, all those kinds of things. So people are coming to us with all kinds of reasons. And so we need to make sure we're clear around that kind of stuff so that we can be most effective. Okay. Has anyone got any last thoughts or?
This last paragraph is really good. I feel like typing it out and putting it on my
Which
wall.
one, sorry? Because I haven't numbered the page.
Oh, the last paragraph under Pastoral says a button. I feel almost like I should number it and put it on my fridge.
Okay, so
People are simply trying to do the best they can. I do not assume adult response in some people. Some
Yep.
people do not have the emotional or personal growth to respond as adults. I am willing to accept that people are unable to respond in a normal manner.
yeah,
That is really good. That is really good.
that's okay.
You don't have to accept that. You can turn away.
No,
But I think that is really good. I think that's really good.
any last comments, ideas?
This just applies, I've seen it with relationships sort of in the family and just over the years. You get one partner, a husband or wife, who's very strong character. I would say that my sister's a bit like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think to keep the peace, her husband, who used to have, be a different person, over the years we all think he's been a bit worn down. He's sort of a bit meeker and milder than he used to be, and he's a lovely person, but that would happen, wouldn't it, in marriages?
If you don't have good boundaries, then yes, it will happen.
So he should have stuck up for himself.
He's
Shouldn't
not
it?
saying anything.
Well, for a lot of people though, they don't get taught this stuff.
Yes.
That's the real issue. See, I think all this stuff that we talk about, boundaries, buttons, all those kinds of things, I think they're very teachable skills. And often children growing up or wherever, whatever, often are taught these kind of skills in order how to manage life and how to manage relationships. I don't think they're taught to the kind of level. We just assume that because they're in families or living in families, they're going to do all right. And, my Carol is at a primary school and they're now starting to teach kids the 5 keys of resilience. Because they realise that kids, need to be resilient, and that for some people it's not taught. But it needs to be in order for kids to be able to bounce when bad things happen.
A person who doesn't believe that they are worth protecting, or that who they are is not of value, will not learn boundaries.
No.
So both that sense of identity needs some kind of help, some healing. They need to be valued before they have what it takes to learn. Because Why would you protect something of no value?
Or you're being taught that you don't value. For some of my people, I know that the only way they feel they're heard is to escalate up to 10 very quickly. Because they don't feel they'll be heard otherwise. And so some of the stuff I do with them is actually helping them to recognise that I'll hear them. But I'm going to hear them at 1, 2 or 3. If they get up to 10, sorry, I'm out of there. And it's teaching people that kind of stuff. But I think for a lot of people, they carry a huge base of shame.
We had a theory in our household when I was growing up. My mother used to say it to us, children should be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
And I carry that in my brain. Right into my adulthood, I checked with her one day, I said, what was it that you meant when you said that? And she brushed it off as if it was a nothing and said, oh, that was just something we said. And I said, you mean to tell me that I have carried this all these years and you meant nothing by it?
Yeah.
I wish I checked earlier. that had a huge impact on me and my 4 siblings.
So again, I think it's very teachable that we often need to help people to learn that stuff and to grow in that stuff, and often that's part of our role in our pastoral care is to help people with that. Yeah. And again, you know, and I think I've said this before, but I think within the life of the church, we've been really good at doing the guilt forgiveness stuff. What we've not been good at is recognising shame and helping people to deal with shame. And shame and guilt are 2 very different things and need to be dealt with differently. And what I've found for a lot of people is I can't do the guilt forgiveness stuff, and I think it's important, by the way, until we've dealt with the shame. Once you've dealt with the shame, people can hear the forgiveness. So it's quite a different model.
I've read most of Brené Brown's books.
Yeah.
Are you all familiar with that?
Yeah.
She's a shame researcher.
Yeah.
She's written some very good stuff
Yeah.
on shame.
Yeah. Yes, she is. And I like her, you can see her on what's that?
TED Talks.
TED Talks. So she's done those, yeah. I've actually written several papers on shame because for a lot of people I work with it's a big, big issue. And I've had to think around what does that mean and how can I best help people with it. But I think it's a big issue within our culture and it's related to status and people having status. And that's why for me working with people who experience mental health problems, often the thing they don't feel they have is status. You know, you get diagnosed first of all as having a mental illness and that can be quite shaming for me. You know, a lot of my people won't name that. I wish we'd get to the point where people would say, yes, I've got bipolar. And that's okay. And no one's going to put them down like, you know, I mean, I talk about rupturing, you know, my Achilles and everyone goes, oh, poor Mark, you know. But no one does that to someone who's, oh, I've got bipolar. They go, oh, okay. So, you know, for me, that's part of it. So people instantly have shame, but they don't have status.
What's the difference between disappointment and shame?
I think there is. We can all have regrets in life, can't we? Disappointment is often around regrets. Something I might have done or could have done, or something that might have happened that didn't happen. That's regret-based. Shame actually says, you're a failure.
Disappointment might be slightly exterior, where shame is very much, to me,
Internal. And it actually affects people.
It's actually part of your identity.
Yeah. I am a failure, I am no good.
I'm a bit disappointed.
I'm flawed, fatally flawed,
So,
there's nothing to be done.
I've got some of my people that I work with who won't step foot inside a church. And it's not because they don't want to. And it's not because they don't value it, but because if they do, the overwhelming shame of God thinks I am a bad person will just overwhelm them.
Mark, we saw when we had our first Alpha session on Wednesday. Who was that comedian? Justin, do you remember? Claire would remember that comedian who introduced it. Well, he wasn't a comedian. He was a minister. But
Charlie Massey.
He was a very fun minister. But he said a lot of people have this image of when they walk into the church, the minister is up the front going, you're naughty, 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 naughty. And that's, you know, the shame.
Shame stuff.
That's the image they have of the minister at the front of the church. Naughty, 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 naughty. Yeah.
I think disappointment, is you can function with disappointment.
Yeah.
because we all get disappointed. But I think to be shameful or to feel shameful is the whole block and dice. I think it's a big umbrella that comes and covers everything and you can't function.
Can't function.
No.
And again, so this is why I'm reinforcing boundaries and stuff today, because again, for us, when we're actually feeling okay about ourselves and have good boundaries, we're going to model that to the people around us, and we're actually going to create the idea that we are safe, which is really important, because for people who experience shame and trauma and all that kind of stuff, they often don't feel safe. So it's this idea of creating safety that's really important, not only for me, but for the person I'm working with. And also it helps me to be able to deal with some of that baggage so it doesn't get in the way and trigger their own sense of shame and stuff. Does that make sense for people? So again, that's really important. Yeah.
Sorry, just quickly. Also, someone who is suffering from shame because of what's gone on in her life, sometimes can walk into a church and think that everybody's looking at her and thinking, you're awful, you're this, you're that, and they just cannot cope with that. That's a hard one. I don't know how the...
Again, I went to see one of the ladies from my church. She has a huge shame base. In fact, when I first got to the church, she would only sit out in the foyer. It's the only place she felt safe in. And so over a period of time we talked about what that shame meant for her, and I said to her, look, I'm happy for you to sit out there. If you feel safe, you stay there. But if you want to come into the church, that's okay, but where will you feel safe in church? She decided it's right up the back by the entrance so she can get out the back door if she needs to. But she came in and she sat, but her shame still gets at her that I'm not good enough, should be doing more. And I went and saw her this week because she hasn't been around for a little while, and I just reassured her that she's loved. You know, the people love you. And for me that's breaking through that shame. But again, we need to have a good sense of boundaries to be able to do that kind of stuff. Okay, so we're going to leave it there.